WoW Classic is alien to the trends of modern gaming. Its recent media success, dominating Twitch and other platforms, shows us that many players do crave a sense of meaning in their games, that they're tired with games that frankly try too darn hard to keep them engaged. It shows a yearning for an older way, but more importantly, it reveals a design blind spot, one that is a looming problem and one that will continue to lead to players burning out of video games. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive episode, the weekly show where we examine the ideas and the practices that drive the industry. World of Warcraft Classic is off to a tremendous start. The beta is crushing it when it comes to the game's usual Twitch numbers, with the culmination of years of campaigning seeming to have paid off for fans of the game and for Blizzard. So credit to Blizzard for listening to their fans, even though it was not as quick as many would have liked. As I said, WoW Classic is alien to modern gaming trends, including many of the trends that now form the basis of the modern version of World of Warcraft. And this is not the first time that we've seen this happen. Jagex's old school RuneScape, of course, was wildly successful, now far eclipsing the size of the game's more modern version. And all of this begs the question, why are these older games so enjoyable? Why are the modern versions of them not really designed in the way that they were? What is the core of what makes people feel good about playing games? Well, for that, I'll need my copy of Ray Dalio's Principles. It's one of my favorite books, and yes, I am bringing a business management book from a hedge fund manager into a gaming video. Work Principle 2. Cultivate meaningful work and meaningful relationships. Meaningful work, meaningful relationships. I would argue that those things are the pillars of what made World of Warcraft successful. It was never successful because it had hyper-engaging, fun gameplay. It was successful because people felt like their work in the game built towards something important, and that their social bonds within the game meant something. If a game is to be played for thousands of hours, then it had better fulfill the requirements of meaningful work and meaningful relationship, for those are the things that provide a lasting benefit, far more than just a quick hit of fun. Make no mistake, much of classic World of Warcraft is work. Now, what is work anyway? Really, work is just doing something, typically for some value in return, be it gardening for happiness, crunching numbers at work for dollars, or tidying the house for peace of mind. We humans, we are beasts of burden. We crave meaningful work. Video games can sometimes provide this by creating a clear hierarchy for individuals to progress up, as well as by providing numerous paths of progression. All things that allow for that feeling of meaningful work, just, unlike the work of your day job, it's actually work that's designed to also be a bit more fun and a bit more engaging. And you'll soon see how this ended up backfiring on Blizzard. As for meaningful relationships, well, that's our friends, it's our guilds, and it's totally self-explanatory. For a game like World of Warcraft Classic, old school RuneScape, or EVE Online, I think that Work Principle 2 from Ray Dalio's Principles is pretty much a target for designers to hit. Here's where things can go wrong. Indeed, it's where Blizzard and where Jagex seem to have went wrong with the modern versions of their games. Instant gratification brain drugs. Okay, modern games, more and more, are designed to give you a quick hit and to be attention-grabbing, to give you a really fun 15 minutes you can quickly grab. As time has went on, games have incorporated far more instant gratification mechanics, things like achievements, faster leveling times, more streamlined systems with a super clear path to victory. Modern World of Warcraft is a game about instant gratification at worst. It still does have many great elements at best, but at worst, it does a lot of that. For an example, in that game, when loot drops, it has a chance to roll at a higher item level, just a random reward for participating, a variable reward system. Your big influx of gear is a weekly random chest that's based off the last week highest level dungeon you did. The classes have a cut down number of abilities and are generally a bit more streamlined, just following a more defined design. Everything's a bit faster with far more randomness. The link between the time you put in and the result you get is rather different to how it was in the past. Overall, it's faster, but with gameplay being fairly tunneled into the most efficient areas, and the potential for positive or negative RNG to impact your results far more so than in the past. And these are all trends that we see carry over to the rest of gaming. Now, play just about any modern game and you will see how they're all about creating the most exciting quick hit that they can. Something you'll notice is how they try to grab you in and how quickly they tend to do that. It's often through fast initial progression, various bonuses, that sort of thing, essentially a highly juiced progression system that's front-loaded, plus longer-term consistent rewards such as Overwatch's loot crates. Why lean so hard into these things instead of just the core gameplay being its own reward? Well, more so than ever, games are competing for watch time. They're competing against each other, they're competing against Netflix, companies are going for grand mono-game live service plans that hook you for an extremely long period of time. You get the picture. More than ever, we are constantly bombarded and overstimulated by things that are trying to worm their way into our brains. And really, here's the fundamental issue that we come up against here. One that may explain how many gamers often feel these days. That strange feeling of being excited about a game, playing it for maybe 10 hours, and then just having the glass shatter with all motivation dissipating. I'm sure you've all felt that. In many cases, this is down to something called the over-justification effect. What is this? Well, it's an effect where an external reward can actually decrease somebody's intrinsic motivation to do something. How does this work? Well, it's down to the difference between an intrinsic and extrinsic reward. Now, an intrinsic reward, that is like the inherent motivation for doing something. For an example, gardening outside because it brings you joy, or playing Unreal Tournament purely for the joy of becoming more skilled at the game. An extrinsic reward, well, that is you doing the same thing, but doing it for an external reward. So playing a game, not to get skilled, but to earn a skin, or doing that gardening, but doing it for money. And what happens is, over time, your motivation for doing that activity fundamentally shifts away from the intrinsic reason to the extrinsic one. And when you run out of extrinsic rewards to earn, then the intrinsic motivation more often than not, does not come back, and you end up losing motivation entirely. And I believe this is what leads to a lot of abandonment in modern games. You play Destiny 2, you enjoy the gameplay, you enjoy the rewards, but then you hit the point in the gear curve where the extrinsic rewards are no longer that exciting, and suddenly all motivation to partake in the game just leaves you. You unlock all the guns in Call of Duty, and then you get bored. Now, some of this is just going to be inherent to video games. Indeed, the systemic aspects of the RPG genre have long had external rewards for completing activities, often things tied to your character's progression, and indeed, that's one of the reasons why you will have seen so many games adopt role-playing game-like systems of progression. Now, a degree of this is inevitable, but what's happening is that the extrinsic rewards are being pushed further and further and further. Taking it back to World of Warcraft, it's not enough in Battle for Azeroth to defeat a boss and have a chance of getting gear. No, you have a chance of getting gear, and then that gear has the chance to roll at a higher quality level, so you can get another little yip yip wahoo of excitement. It's not enough to slowly work towards earning some gear. Instead, you've got to log in and you've got to find the game littered with world quests that will definitely give you gear and a big checklist of high time efficiency rewards and weeklies to do. Yet, once you're through your daily lot, often the motivation to continue playing just dissipates wholesale. And I would argue that World of Warcraft right now is largely experiencing the negative effects of having highly juiced extrinsic rewards. It's flogging a dead horse. It's squeezing, like juicing an orange, and then putting the pulp of the orange back in the juicer, trying to get more. At some point, it just doesn't work. The overjustification effect, I believe, is an impending problem for the industry, especially now that more games have shifted over to being live services that are almost predicated by the need to have a week after week extrinsic reward for you to get. Now, why do this? Are designers stupid? Do they not understand? Hell no! They are smart people and they do understand, but in many ways I feel like they're forced into it. So why, especially when there are clear long-term downsides to such an over-the-top method of rewarding players and getting them to play your game? Well, the thing is that those highly juiced extrinsic reward systems, they're great at grabbing players' attention, giving them instant gratification, and giving them a strong initial experience. In World of Warcraft, you hit max level and you quickly get a whole bunch of gear. It's fun. In Destiny, you hit the soft cap, you get a bunch of gear. It's fun. A designer may know that they can't push that system too far, but they also know that they are in competition with games that will push as hard as they can with instant gratification. In the battle for watch time and initial success, you've got to use every single trick in the book, and that's why I think a lot of designers feel pigeonholed into using these systems. Now, contrast it to Classic WoW or to RuneScape 2007. Back in Classic, well, it was just very slow. Bosses dropped less loot, but there was no RNG past the bit of loot dropping. Same goes for leveling, it was slow, dungeons, it was all a lot slower, all of that stuff. It was a slow burn, and the social dynamics were totally different. You were locked onto your server with a limited number of people you could play with. The social dynamics mattered a lot more. Guilds mattered a lot more. There were no matchmaking features. Everything was manual, all in a shared world with no sharding. Extrinsic rewards did exist, and it was a finite game, but the pacing was a good bit slower, and because of the solid enough content and the emphasis and team play, Classic was able to provide what I mentioned at the start of this video as being a pillar of a long-lasting game: the ability to provide and maintain meaningful work and meaningful relationships. Old school RuneScape actually has a massive advantage over Classic WoW in my book, and that is that it's more of a sandbox. Sure, Classic is more of a sandbox than Battle for Azeroth, the most recent WoW expansion, but it's fundamentally a theme park MMO. Old school RuneScape has a more vibrant economy and player-driven systems, and while it does have some theme park elements, that sandbox can keep it ticking on the back of player-generated interactions for far longer. I think the ultimate example of all this is EVE Online. Yes, it's a niche game, but it's a game that's had a remarkably consistent number of players for a long time, averaging 35k players online for the last 4 years, showing incredible retention. So in a world where EVE is just so consistent, where old school RuneScape is doing better than modern RuneScape, and WoW Classic seems to be trending so well, why do we not see more games designed like that? Well, I think there's a large problem, sort of attention economy, attention competition. Those short-term hits from many of the modern games, they're really potent. They are hard for a purposefully designed slow burn game to compete against. A game just like WoW Classic would probably struggle, but the thing is that with WoW Classic, people have already bought into the notion of it because of their history with the game. They're already on board, and the same goes for old school RuneScape. It seems like going to extreme lengths to win the attention economy will often come at the expense of a game's ability to, over the long term, provide meaningful work and meaningful relationships to their players. Now, all of that said, and this might seem a bit grim, but I don't think it's all bad, Classic shows us a hunger for the old, more intrinsically motivated way. Indeed, players seem to be getting tired of being bombarded with all the attention-grabbing, very transparent psychological tricks of many modern titles. Indies certainly do seem to be filling the gap well, and who knows, if WoW Classic continues to do well, perhaps Blizzard will learn. They certainly have suggested that they are paying close attention to WoW Classic and they're thinking about what they can learn from it, and maybe other companies will sort of catch the hint. I'd love to know what you think about this, about the meaningful work and the meaningful relationships and the over-justification effect. For me, have you ever had that feeling? It's just you play a game, you're super motivated, and suddenly the glass shatters. And maybe you feel like me that this just happens more and more these days than it sort of did in the past. Is that rose-tinted goggles? Or is that design trends shifting over time and being more engaging up front, but somehow just losing that long-lasting appeal? I'm not 100% sure on the last point, so please let me know what you think. A massive thank you to everyone who supports this channel, especially the patrons who especially make the deep dive series possible to do. And just thank you very much for watching. And with that, I'll see you next time.